Thank you very much. So, as Chloe says, my name's Tom Matthewson. I work for HR Wallingford. The HR, despite this being a careers event, does not stand for human resources. It stands for hydraulics research. And we are a company of about 250 people based in Wallingford near Oxford, working with a whole array of clients who are interested in planning new or improving existing projects that are in the water environment. Particularly for this forum, we help clients all over the world with projects in the marine environment, or the marine and coastal environment. So that might be flood and coastal protection and understanding flood and coastal risk, beach management and developments on the coastline, which might be housing or tourism or port developments. And also, of course, increasingly now, the marine renewable energy business is a major part of what we do in terms of helping clients worldwide. And of course, here in the UK, we're a global leader as a country in offshore wind. So what I'm going to do in the next 20-25 minutes is just give you a little bit of a feel for what actually does a career actually involve in work when working in the what I've sort of grouped together as the marine science and engineering field. So there's HR Wallingford is just one of many consultants in the UK who provide these kinds of services. So there's a huge array of opportunities in broadly speaking, the marine science and engineering world. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of a flavour of what we do at HR, but I think in some respects, although we think we're special, it's typical of the sector as a whole. So what does marine science and engineering actually involve? A lot of the job, starting from the graduate upwards, involves understanding complex problems. There's a huge amount of different factors at play when one's dealing with projects in the marine environment. Got some examples of that. Also involves working with some of the most advanced computer and other laboratory tools in the world, because there are some very significant forces at play when one's working in the marine environment, and it's obviously critical to understand those as best we can. Also, we work with data, so both collecting data about the marine environment and analysing it and using that information to solve some of the problems that I've just touched upon. But the softer side of things is also critical in consultancy generally, but in this field as much as any. Being able to communicate with colleagues, with clients, understand their problems and discussing with them what the solutions might be, and also dealing with the other, what we call stakeholders, who might be interested in or have a concern about a project one's helping to design for a client. And obviously, I would say it's interesting, but it's most people in this field are passionate about what they do and really enjoy working with colleagues and clients to find the best solutions. So to try and illustrate that, I've got go to the next slide, little animation. So will this run? So this is an example, hopefully this is coming through okay, of a project that we've recently, or is nearing completion at Aberdeen, where Aberdeen is one of the most important ports in the UK, and they have a major expansion program underway at the moment to build basically a new port to cope with the amount of shipping activity that they foresee there in the long term. So if you imagine with a facility like this, there's a whole range of complex issues to consider, from the size of ships and how they can safely navigate in, what depth of water they need, how they interact with each other, what sort of structure do we need to protect those ships from, let's play that again. What sort of structures such as breakwaters do you need to keep those ships safe? And all these sorts of decisions, and that means understanding what the wave conditions will be for the next 50 years or longer. So all of those things have profound implications on the cost and feasibility of. So a lot to consider, and many of those aspects we've been helping Aberdeen with, and many other clients involved as well. So that's just a typical kind of project that you could be working on if you're involved in this sort of field. Stop that. Ooh. The other, obviously, maybe it's obvious. Well, I hope it is. Fundamental aspect of the marine and coastal environment is everything we do really needs to be underpinned by an understanding of water, particularly how it behaves in the open environment. This is a slightly unusual example where we've been working with a with a research project to look at or better understand how water flows behave around an offshore deep sea seamount, which is kind of like an underwater mountain, because these kinds of areas are being considered for deep sea mining. And before that kind of thing can happen, it's important to understand what the effects might be, how sediment that's disturbed during that process of mining might disperse, and therefore the environmental effects that could flow from it. So those kinds of things mean, those kinds of concerns mean one needs to have the tools to understand how water will behave, and the particles, whether that's pollutants or just sand and muds, are distributed as a result of human activities. So as well as problem solving, another aspect to this kind of career is being able to understand how to apply these kinds of sophisticated tools, what data they need, how to keep them fed with the right information so that you can then interpret the results and provide good advice on the implications of this kind of project. Computer science has had a profound effect on this field. This is a shot from the early 1970s, and this was considered state of the art at the time. Got punch cards, and that was the state of the art in terms of using computer technology at that time. And as computer technology has improved and increased in power, so our abilities to resolve and understand marine processes and oceanography have also improved. I'm sure as your careers develop, so what we consider now as high performance computing will be considered in the same light as we see this kind of technology today. I particularly love all the paper just pouring out the back there. That's fantastic. This obviously doesn't exist anymore, but well, I should say this kind of computer power in this whole room would probably be the equivalent of a fairly average desktop or laptop computer nowadays. So that gives you an idea of how things change. What do we do now? So rather than using punch cards and paper spewing out of a computer, we're now more in this kind of world where we use three-dimensional modeling to predict the behavior of water and the forces it can exert on structures, so that one's able to both visualize but also quantify those kinds of processes and the forces, so that you're able to design. This might be an offshore wind structure, or a supporting pile for a port, a port structure. And we can do things like look at the force exerted, understand the flow velocities in 3 dimensions in ways that were scarcely imaginable when that previous photo was taken. Another key development that's been sort of a process of evolution is virtual reality. And it's been another aspect of what we do at HR Wallingford, although there are plenty of other organisations that are also offering services in this kind of area. And here we have what I find easiest to describe as it's the equivalent of an aircraft simulator, but for ships. Here we've got a colleague here. He is navigating a tugboat in a virtual environment in a port that is under development. So we're able to design ports and understand how ships and the people who work on them can interact before those ports are built, so we can confirm that they're safe, that they're feasible to operate before obviously the huge amounts of money are invested to build those ports. This is a mineral, an iron export terminal in Australia, I think. So this kind of technology is improving all the time. Since this photo was taken, we've got simulators that have even better visual screens and that kind of thing. We use these kinds of tools for design purposes, but of course, not so much us, but other consultants might use these, or clients might use these for training purposes. So to train skippers and masters on how to use or how to maneuver either ships they're unfamiliar with, or ports they're unfamiliar with in a safe environment. Talked a little bit about the kind of the tools that are underpinned by computer technology. I should say that that's still an important part of what we do in the marine world. It's still based on physical, real-life experiments. And that's partly because, notwithstanding the huge developments in computer science, there are still some processes, particularly wave development and propagation, that is very hard to represent in 3 dimensions, especially in computers. The computer power just isn't there to conduct large-scale experiments of that, especially. So what we still use, I've got a couple of examples here, are full-scale, well, sorry, not full-scale, scale, but very large laboratory facilities for testing the effects of waves, especially, but in this case, waves and sediments on offshore wind structures, for example. So I'm just going to let this video run for a minute or two, because there's some animations here, but also some explanatory text that will pop up that will explain a little bit more about what this kind of tool involves. So you can see here there's a structure shown in the facility, and this is an offshore wind pile, and this is a key part of the work we do at the moment, is advising clients on how things like scour holes will develop around offshore wind structures, and therefore how they can be, those kinds of issues can be either prevented or managed if they do arise for unforeseen reasons. So this is the largest, this is in Wallingford in our labs here, and this is one of the largest facilities in the world, and there are scientists using this daily, even in the present times, to look at the effects of waves and sediments on offshore wind structures. The other type of physical experiment that we conduct, and is an important part of the work we do, is that was the structure I just showed you. The testing facility is what's called a flume, so it's kind of about 3 or 4 meters wide. It's still a cross section. This is a what we might call a 3-dimensional physical model, where we construct a whole port and look at the effects of waves and sediments and on the wave climate, and therefore the behavior of ships that are moored in those ports or trying to navigate in those ports. So this is an example, and again, I'm just going to let this run for a minute or two because it's quite a nice time-lapse video with some annotations explaining it better than I can. So here the bathymetry is being constructed, and obviously this is the seabed shape is being constructed here prior to building the port itself. So then, without the proposed port in place, we then develop and test the existing wave conditions to check that it matches reality. Now you can see the scale port being constructed. Obviously, this is a very labor-intensive part of the experiment. Building the breakwaters, making sure everything is exactly in proportion. So then we bring in the ships themselves with testing devices, and we're able to test the behavior of those ships inside, well, particularly inside the port, the new port, to confirm that the multi-million-pound breakwaters will actually do what they need to do in terms of preventing too much ship movement on the berth, which obviously has safety as well as cost implications. So a lot of work goes on into then, having constructed the port in scale, then testing the conditions and measuring them using delicate measuring devices and laser technology and that kind of thing to look for movement in the breakwaters. I think that probably is enough of that. You can see the general concept of what's involved. I think this is actually an important point that's just been made on that annotation, that making changes at this stage in terms of design to improve the what we call the performance of the scheme, as in the ability of the scheme to protect ships in the port. It's much cheaper and cost effective to do that in a laboratory like this than build a 50 million pound breakwater and then have to change it because it's not doing what it needs to do. Okay, I think I'll stop that one there. one of the things I mentioned at the outset was that the fundamentally we rely on data, and there are a whole array of careers involved in the collection of marine and coastal data, water depths, flows, waves, conditions, all that kind of thing, sediments. And we do a little bit of that as well. More often than not, we're using surveys collected by specialist survey companies. But then once we conduct the kinds of experiments I just showed you, whether that's in the computer, as it were, or in the laboratory, we're then collecting output data from those experiments to then inform the improvements or confirmation of the design. Something that we have been doing, though, is we've developed our own tools such as this in collaboration with our clients, such as the Environment Agency, to collect data using remote. You could think of these as drones, really. These are little remote controlled survey vessels. I think this will run, see what happens. So there are a whole wealth of careers that kind of sit alongside what we do, but we do a little bit of ourselves involved with being out in the field and actually collecting real data. So this little boat is enabling us from surveyors from the riverbank to collect information on flow speeds and water depth and that kind of thing. Also, it's worth saying that there's a strong research and development aspect to this kind of consultancy. We've been recently spending a lot of effort on understanding how animals behave in the water environment, and that's taken us into the field of modeling biological systems. So this is a very simple, quick example of this, just more of fun than anything else, to illustrate the kind of thing where we're trying to develop expertise and understanding of how biological systems such as fish respond and move in relation to external influences, which might be the things we do, man does in the environment, or humankind does in the environment. Or in this case, just to illustrate the point, the model has put in it this little red shark into the fish tank to illustrate how different we can assign different properties to different types of fish and how they respond. Nearly done. I did want to, although I've talked a lot about technology, this is, as I said at the outset as well, this communication is absolutely key. Our work has no value at all if we can't communicate it and explain and understand the implications of what we're doing, but also understand the problem we're trying to solve and work with others to find solutions. And so, as well as having very advanced tools and specialist scientists who deal with those, we also have space for people whose skills are more on perhaps the softer side of dealing with other people and working with them to find solutions. Just very quickly to wrap up, as this is a careers event, I thought I probably ought to just say what's the type of qualifications people have. Generally, if I look around the office, most people have a scientific degree or engineering degree. Generally, it might be in oceanography, or some of the modelers have more of a mathematical or physics background. Obviously, civil engineers, naval architecture, background to the staff who are involved in the ship simulation type work that I mentioned, and environmental science in terms of working with using these tools to understand the effects on the environment of the kinds of projects we're talking about here. One final quick slide, if there's time. It was to say that one of the things I've enjoyed the most about this career is that it's very often international. We have, I think, about 27 different nationalities working at HR Wallingford, but our clients and where their projects are can be all over the world. And you can be dealing with 2 or 3 different parts of the world in a single day in terms of the sorts of projects you're involved in. And that makes for a very interesting and rewarding career at a personal level, alongside obviously the technical interest and challenges that are involved. So that concludes the presentation. So very happy to take any questions in any time that's remaining.
Lovely, thanks ever so much, Tom. That was really interesting. We did have one question in the chat, and I know did to James, but he has asked, how can schools, colleges, cadet units get to visit your site, obviously post-COVID, when things are back and open to us visiting?
So we happily host school visits and also cadets visits. It's more than happy to take any requests for school visits, and I can see what we can do. I should also say, in terms of work experience, we do take particularly PhD students and master's students on work placements in normal circumstances, and at any one time we will have 10 or more PhD or master's students working in the building on projects or their own research.